Deleted before I got recorded.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
On behalf of the library, thank you so much for coming. Welcome. And thank you so much to the Johnny Mack Foundation for sponsoring this event. It has been a pleasure to work on, and we're so happy to have these panelists here. So please welcome Jen McNamara. She's going to welcome our panelists.
Hi, everyone. Great to see a terrific crowd tonight, although I'm not surprised given this incredible panel that we have here. I'm going to introduce Tom Richardson, who is the former chief of department of the New York City Fire Department. But more importantly to me, he was actually my husband's chief when my husband was at Engine 234. So Tom and I have a very long history. Tom, besides the unbelievable career that he has, and I don't think that I'm looking around at so many of you wearing fire department t-shirts. I'm sure many of you know the incredible career he has and what he continues to do through many different organizations. But for me on a personal level, he continues to be there for me and for my son. I lost my husband in 2009, 9/11 related cancer. And Tom has always been there for us, especially has been there for my son, who has his own independent relationship with Tom, which is, incredible for a 19-year-old. And he guides him as Jack makes his way in both the EMS and the fire services as he's in college. And I could think of no better person when Mike talked to me about doing this, when the library director came to me and talked to me about doing this, I reached out to Tom immediately. Hey, what can we do? And, Tom had like 20 different ideas, of course. So he's always my go-to. He's always got the great ideas and the great thoughts. And besides that, he's got the biggest heart of probably anybody I know. So I'm going to have Tom Richardson come up and introduce the rest of this incredible panel.
Okay.
So thank you all.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. I'm going to stay right here and introduce everybody. But thank you for having us. And as Jen said, my history with Jen is through her husband, John. John and I worked together in Crown Heights. I was a chief in Battalion 38. John was a firefighter in Engine 234 and Ladder 123, which were in quarters with us. So he was a wonderful guy, just a tremendous individual. So whenever Jen calls me, and if I can help, I do. And when she called me about this event, I thought, wow, this is really something that a lot of communities don't do things like this, particularly as it relates to 9/11. And so I thought this was an excellent forum. And I said, I have some ideas. And then one of the ideas I came up with was, how would you feel about if I bring in some folks that have, had a direct impact on their lives, from 9/11 in so many different ways, as well as on careers, right? So I was on the job at the time. I was 20 years on the job. I was battalion chief. I wasn't working that day, so I wasn't at the site, that day, and wasn't there till the next day. But I thought of the beautiful, perfect three people up here. This is John Esposito. John is the current chief of department of the New York City Fire Department. John's a Long Island guy. He lives in Smithtown, grew up in Ronkonkoma. I'm from Long Island. I grew up in Deer Park. I still live in Deer Park. I have to my left here, this is Mrs. Kathy Vigiano. Kathy was a New York City police officer. Kathy's husband, Joe, was an ESU police officer, was killed in 9/11, as was his brother, John, who was a New York City firefighter. And their dad, John Vigiano Sr., was a fire captain, passed away several years ago now, from 9/11 cancer. And then Kathy's going to talk about her story as we get into the conversation tonight. And then all the way at the end is Paul Conlon. Paul is a retired battalion chief. Paul was working that day. He'll tell you his story. He was a captain at the time, responded to the World Trade Center. And as a result of his experience that day, Paul wrote a book. And I'll tell you, and he can talk about the book, it's the best book that I have ever read about 9/11. It's a short read. It's a heartfelt read. And when he talks about it, I hope you'll take the time to get it and read it. It's a wonderful, beautiful, compassionate story about the day and an individual that he was working with that day that happened to be killed. So what I'll do now is I'm going to start with the chief. because he's the chief. The chief is the chief. I'm going to have the chief introduce himself a little bit more about his career and what was he doing on 9/11. You know, what was his direct relation to 9/11? What was going on that day for him? So, Chief John Esposito.
Thank you, Tom. So, thank you for that welcome. Happy to be here. And when Tom Richardson calls, you say yes, whatever he asks for. So here we are. So, as he said, born and raised on Long Island. This April, I had 35 years in the fire department, trying to catch up to 41, 42,
Something like that.
Current chief of department, we are spending a lot of time right now with our plans for the 25th memorial service. It will be on September 9th at the Ferry Hawk Stadium. That's the minor league baseball stadium on Staten Island. When you sit in the stands and you sit on the field, we'll have some seats. You're going to look across, see New York Harbor, and right into Lower Manhattan. We have invited all the families back. We have 3 distinct family groups. We have the 343 members of the fire department that died that day. We have 452 members that worked in that day, the days and weeks and months afterwards, and died from their World Trade Center exposure. And then we have 156 members that were retired that day that came back and worked and eventually died from their World Trade Center exposure. So all told, that's almost 950 people. Some of them unfortunately passed away young, some of them older, but we will honor all of them on September 9th. We expect a nice full stadium. If you know the fire service, we're a family, and we all come out and honor our people. We're expecting firefighters from around the country to be there. My 9/11 story is just lucky enough to be off that day, and I think for many people, when they first heard it, somebody called them or told them, turn on the TV, a plane hit the World Trade Center. And, the 9/11 report that looked into the congressional, committee that looked into September 11th, one of their big criticisms was the failure of the imagination of our leaders, of everybody to think of the attack that the attack and our failure to imagine and plan. And when most people, including myself, heard a plane into the Trade Center, we all thought a small plane, right? You didn't imagine that it was a jetliner intentionally flown into those buildings, and then a short time later on live TV for everybody to see, another plane. So that's started a chain of events, of what was going to be a day off, a beautiful September day that, then turned into, a ride into the city that when you take the Northern State Parkway, there's a place when you come up over Sunnyside Boulevard and you're getting down to where you can get onto the expressway. For about 6 seconds, there's a spot there as you come over the hill that you used to be able to see the World Trade Center, both towers, all the way from Nassau County. And going into work, because I had worked in Lower Manhattan for many years, going in the afternoon, you could see that. And that day going in, obviously you didn't see that. All you saw was the smoke rising from the scene. The expressway was closed. We were able to, the police had it closed off. You were able to get on, and very eerie ride on the Long Island Expressway when there's nobody else there, and able to get in and get down to the Trade Center shortly before number 7 collapsed. And then just a long, long day, long week, long months. And, we all have our story, but it's, still that day is still with us in the fire department every day. It's like the day that doesn't end.
Appreciate that, John. So Kathy, just as a reference, I know Kathy a very long time. I was actually at her wedding when she married Joe, because I was very good friends with her father-in-law. Was like my senior mentor in the fire department. He was always looking out for me. And so I became very friendly with Joe and his brother John. They both joined the volunteer fire department in Deer Park that I'm a member of. And so I got to know them very well as they were growing up, if you will. And then I met Kathy, and her and Joe were together and they got married. And so I'll let Kathy talk about her experience and her day, her 9/11, what was going on and for her that day. Of course, she was greatly impacted, as you can tell, but I'm going to let her tell the story. Thank you.
Okay. I was a police officer, and September 11th was election day. So my husband went to work in the morning, and I didn't have to be at work till 12 in the afternoon because I had the night election duty. I put my two boys on the school bus. I had just had a third son. He was 3 months old. And I get home, and there's a UPS driver or FedEx driver at my house, and he said, "Did you see the news? A plane just hit the World Trade Center." It's like, oh, Joe's going to have fun today. And I went in the house. He told me to turn on the TV. I went in the house, turned on the TV, and I saw a plane hit the building. And then there's a ticker on the bottom calling all emergency workers into work: police, fire, doctors, nurses. Quick, took a shower, took my infant to my parents' house, and headed into work. And like the chief said, the LIE was shut down. It was like I kept getting stopped by Suffolk police. There's checkpoints all along the way, and I'm hearing on the radio that we're under attack. It's like, it was eerie. You don't know what you're driving into. The Queen's Courts was just hit. I heard that on the news. Yeah, so I got to work, and I was put on standby. And then I went next door because our radios were different back then. We couldn't hear what was going on in Manhattan. I went next door to the emergency service to listen to their radios. And a retired cop was there, and he told me that 300 rescue workers were just killed. And I was like, whoa. Then I started calling my husband. He's not answering his phone. I went in to talk to my boss, Chief Secreto, and I said, I got to get to Manhattan. I can't find my husband. He's not answering. So he gave me his car. I went into Manhattan. I didn't even know that the Trade Center came down. I didn't see it on the news. They must have showed it while I was in the shower. They didn't say it on the radio on my way in. There was no TVs in the precincts. And I didn't know they came down until that night sometime. And somebody called to say that they found my husband's cell phone at the ambulance staging area. So, I notified my union, and they started checking hospitals, looking for him. That was my day.
Thank you. And Kathy, as she mentioned, she has 3 sons. 2 of them are New York City police officers right now, Joe and Jimmy, and her son John is currently in the Marine Corps, serving, and the other 2 boys also served in the Marine Corps. So family of service, as you can see, right? So, and Paul Conlon. Paul was working that day. He was working in an engine company in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, and they responded to the Trade Center. He was the captain, the officer on duty that day.
Thank you, Tom. It's such an honor to be here. I'm so sorry for your loss, Kathy, and Chief Esposito taking the time out to be here, to running the fire department. I can't imagine how hard that is. But as he said, when Tom Richardson asks you to do something, you tend to say yes because he's Tom Richardson. But thank you all for being here. I did write a book about my experience, and it's Daniel Sir, A Story of September 11th. And it's not the story of September 11th. It's just one story. You all have stories of September 11th. We all do, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't. So it's really an honor to be here. I was a captain on September 11th. I was promoted September 8th, 2001. So my first tour as a captain in the borough of Brooklyn, I worked as a firefighter and a lieutenant in Manhattan, the Bronx, was on Monday, September 10th. And I worked in 216 engine in Williamsburg. And during the course of the day, this firefighter, Daniel Starr, really stood out. And it's an outstanding company. So he did a couple of things that would make a covering officer say, like, okay, this is one of the good guys. And when I got my assignment for the next day, for September 11th, I was going back to the same company, which was great, because when you're a covering officer, it's nice to know where the kitchen is, where the pole is, where the bathroom is, and you don't have to drag your gear back home. And I took a quick look in the day book before I went home to see who was working the next day, and I see that Daniel Starr is working. So I said, "Oh, this is good." And I like the firehouse. I like the guys in the area. And so on September 11th, I went to work, and at 8:46 a.m., the North Tower gets hit by the first plane, and not knowing their response area, they're fairly Williamsburg is fairly close to Manhattan. I wasn't sure if we were going to go get relocated or whatever. So I kind of did some paperwork you have to do. We do the roll call, and at 9:03, the South Tower gets hit by the second plane, and 216 gets assigned to this fifth alarm. There was a fifth alarm for the North Tower, and a fifth alarm transmitted now for the South Tower, which is a lot of companies. And on our way there, on the Manhattan frequency, they told us to report into Chief Barbara at West and Liberty. So I'm thinking they're trying to keep these two responses separate, because the chaos that must be at the scene. And so we approached from the south. It took a while to get there. We reported to Chief Barber at West and Liberty. And there were two companies at his command post, 217 engine and 205 engine. And they had been told to stand fast, so they weren't needed yet in the building. And so they have their coats open, and they have everyone's carrying, the firefighters and engine companies carry a 50-foot length of hose, and they have an extra air cylinder. They have them on the ground. And when I reported into him, he said, "You're going to stand fast, Cap." I was like, "Oh, okay." I was about to tell the guys, and he said, "Oh no, wait a minute. They need you. You're going in." And he points to the entrance to World Trade Center, which is about 200 yards away from us. And the 217 and 205, they have to buckle up and they have to get their gear. But we just walked up, so we kind of 216 is leading the way. And Daniel Starr says, "This is a terrible day. Let's make this quick." And so we're walking, and he's on my right shoulder, and we're looking forward so as not to trip on anything, because there's burning debris and there's stuff in the street. And we're looking up because there's also stuff. It's kind of like slow motion stuff coming off the building. And we're looking forward and we're looking up, and all of a sudden we're about 100 yards from the entrance, and it's like an explosion. And Danny got hit by a jumper, someone who knows where they jumped from, and the guys behind me are like, "Oh shit," And one guy, Tony Sansevero, one firefighter, gets down on one knee and he checks his carotid, and he looks up and he says, "Oh, he's got a pulse," But we pick him up and we get him. There was a scaffolding in front of 90 West Street building, about 50 yards away. They were doing construction on it, I guess. I called I called the Mayday into the chief, and they sent paramedics down under the scaffolding. Two guys from 217 came along with their longboard, long orange board that you put victims on. And the guys took Danny's mask off and his coat, and they're doing CPR. They have him on the longboard. The medics come down. We put him on the stretcher, run him to the ambulance. When we got him in the ambulance, Dr. Kelly, who was the chief medical officer, I don't know where she came from, but she goes in the ambulance, and as she comes out, she kind of shakes her head as if, he's in very bad shape. And she walks off, and I had a probie with me, and I tried to put him in the ambulance just because I kind of wanted to get him out of there. The other two firefighters that were with in 216 were working on Danny with the paramedic. And they said, oh, no, there's no room, there's no room. So he closes the door to the ambulance, John Johnson, the probie. The ambulance takes off, and I look at him and I'm like, well, I'm not going to report in an officer and a probie to Chief Burns in the 2 World Trade Center because there's nothing we can really do. I said, let's go back to the rig, we'll regroup. And we turn and we take about 2 steps, and the South Tower, starts coming down. So we're just running, and I'm saying a Hail Mary. I had no idea and we both survived. And I went back, found the chauffeur, and we approached the buildings again. And then the North Tower came down, and we're kind of running again. And then, I could go on, but I don't want to. But the after this event, I worked for about 15 more years. But as soon as I retired, I felt that Danny's story had to be told because 16 of us were sent into the South Tower, and no one in the South Tower survived. But 13 of us are still alive because of his death. 2 guys from 217 didn't survive the collapse of the South Tower, so they didn't make it, but 13 of us did make it. So I just felt that it was a story worth sharing, and all proceeds go to the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. I'm not like hawking a book or something, but that's
Thank you for that.
That's why I'm here.
I appreciate that. And just for reference, when Paul says the word probie, that's a probationary firefighter. That's a brand new firefighter. So imagine probationary firefighter that day responding, and there were many that were killed, quite frankly.
And there were many that was their first day.
That was their first day, right? Yeah. So what I did for tonight was I came up with several questions. Probably not going to get to all of them. Some of them are specific to one of the panelists. Some of them, my first question, in fact, will be for all of them to answer. What we'll do is we're going to go through some questions. I'm going to leave about 15 minutes closer to the end for any questions that you may have. And then we'll finish up with one final question for the panelists to answer before we go home tonight, okay? So thank you for your attention. It's good to see a bunch of folks that were on the job, some retirees. I appreciate you all being here. The greatest job on earth, and we're all great to be part of it. And even the police officer, we're going to go with it. It's all good. She's a good sport. She's a good lady. And Kathy does a lot of good work for a group called the Survivors of the Shield, which are members of the police department, widows and widowers, line of duty deaths in the police department. She kind of runs that organization. So you could talk about that a little later on, but it's an important work that she does. She really does an amazing job with that as well. So the first question I have for everybody, I want you to answer it from your perspective. How has understanding of the events of 9/11 changed over the last 25 years? From your perspective, Chief, how has the understanding of the events changed, or do you think they've changed?
Well, from my perspective, looking at, the biggest question we had, and if you grew up in and around New York, something that we always heard about the World Trade Center and the Twin Towers was that they were built to withstand the impact of a plane or a jet. And that's just something I remember hearing. And, the irony of it and they did, right? They did withstand the impact. They didn't withstand, the jet fuel, burning and heating up the steel. And in the time after, that day, you look at the construction of those buildings. In the fire service, we spend a lot of time learning and studying building construction and why buildings fall down. And that was what we would consider lightweight construction, and almost as crappy construction that you could imagine. And going back to the early 70s when they were built, the chief of department at the time, I can't remember.
John O'Hagan.
John O'Hagan fought the Port Authority, right? They didn't have to adhere to the New York City Building Code. So they built buildings because it was not, the whole federalism thing, and New York City law doesn't apply because it was a bi-state agency. They could build the building that they wanted to build, did not have to comply, did not have sprinklers at the time. And if you know lightweight construction, these were, an interior, circle of steel columns, the outer perimeter, and those columns were connected by lightweight steel, parallel cord steel trusses that when they get heated, they fail, right? We didn't know that at the time, right? We didn't know the construction. So when you know the construction, you're actually surprised that the building stood as long as they did with that impact and all of that heat. And I know there's a lot of, conspiracy theorists out there. I think those buildings fell. That steel got heated up. It can't take that weight. And once it started to fall, and it's, surprising that we didn't, that we didn't know that. And we know that there are no other buildings in New York built like that. You compare that to the Empire State Building that was steel columns encased in concrete that withstood in the 1940s or early 50s, that withstood an airplane crash, right? An Army bomber on a foggy day flew right into the Empire State Building. Fuel leak, all of that, fire, there was some fatalities, but the building stood. The steel was encased in concrete, so it did not get heated up. There was no failure, no, structural failure. So, from that perspective, I think we learned, and, that the construction and what Chief O'Hagan said in the early 70s was proven right, 30 years later, that we should not have had a building built like that.
So from the law enforcement perspective, like, what do you think? How has the understanding of 9/11 changed from law enforcement? Obviously, there's been a lot of energy and a lot of funding put into, more security and homeland security and all that kind of stuff. Well, how other ways do you think things have changed?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been in law enforcement in 19 years.
But you were there then, right?
But
So,
yeah.
like, what do you think now? Like, just
Well,
from the people that you know.
I was prepared to answer it a little differently.
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So,
Answer it the way you want.
at first,
Yeah.
I was just focused on paying my bills. I knew I couldn't afford my house, with no
Okay.
overtime.
Yeah.
Paying my bills, and then the focus came on who did this. Let's prosecute them, find them, and then came up the realization that this could have been prevented. There was a lot of breakdown in our laws. KSM came here and got a college degree, and he paid cash for college. I mean, you weren't supposed to pay cash. You had to track where the money came from, and that wasn't done. He found a small college in North Carolina, and he went to school there, and that's where the plan started. If that didn't happen, this could have been changed.
Interesting. Yeah.
There was intelligence and policy failures. There was a passenger that noticed them doing a dry run, and they called the FBI. The FBI met the plane for the dry run. He noticed somebody in first class talking to somebody in the back of the plane and going back and forth. And he notified the stewardess notified the FBI. The FBI came to the plane and they interviewed him, but they let them off the plane. They never followed up on anything. So
Wow.
I think hopefully we have more communications between interagencies, and
Right.
I don't know.
I think we do. Probably not perfect, still not perfect, but I think it's gotten a lot better. I think you could agree with that. I know I retired 3.5 years ago, and I think there's a lot more collaboration going on between agencies today. I think from federal, state, and local, I think it's gotten better. Let's put it that way. I don't think it'll ever be perfect, right?
Well, because they're different agencies, right? Different cultures,
Right.
but certainly, and that was another of the big findings after September 11th, is the need for all the agencies to work better together. And in the years since then, certainly with the police and fire department, the relationship is much better. We will always have a somewhat competitive relationship, but we have that internal in the fire department that, with the next firehouse over, we're better than them, or
Right.
that's the nature of the people that do these jobs. But that cooperation and that collaboration, the need for the fire service to be involved in the intelligence community, right? That law enforcement, what the information that law enforcement needs to protect, like names and dates and people's identities, that's not the info we need, right? The fire service needs the methods, right? What are they going to do? Because if it gets prevented by law enforcement, then fire service isn't involved. But if they're not able to stop it, we need to know what those methods are so that we can react to it and deal with it. We have very robust in the fire department intelligence and analysis division that is looking at everything happening overseas in the Middle East, in Europe, when there's some sort of attack. What method do they have? Because we're likely to see that here. And if you look at Manhattan over the last 25 years, we've had, a couple of vehicle-borne, car bombs. We've had some pressure cooker devices. We've had a couple of ramming attacks. We've had it, and it's stuff that was on our radar, and we were prepared to deal with it.
Paul, you have anything to answer to that question about how's the understanding change in 9/11?
I mean, the way I was looking at it was more that day. Very soon, I mean, at first it was just firefighters and cops and EMS, on the scene there. But as soon as there were any civilians, they were all trying to help. From I remember seeing a civilian handing a firefighter like a gallon jug of water, and since then, it's come out there were like 500,000 people that either worked or volunteered at the site from 9/11 until the site closed on May 30th, 2002, and that's a lot of people. And I think that that just human reaction to such tragedy is something that it kind of goes beyond. These people were evil, but there were so many good people that really tried to help out afterwards. And I think, like I said, maybe I read the question wrong, but it didn't. It strikes me that sentiment is still very much alive. People will always want to help out with this tragedy.
Yeah, I agree.
You see it on the news.
Yeah,
you see
I do.
a hurricane or
I
a
agree with you.
wildfire.
No, that's a great point.
People are like, what can I do?
That's a great point. That's a very good point. Because when you do see tragedies on the news or in your local communities, people do step up. People jump up and help their neighbors all the time. Maybe more so than ever, I think, because not only that, I think because people are more aware of things today with social media and the 24-hour news cycle, right? Everybody hears and sees things almost immediately. And so if they can help, and how about all these fundraising things that they do, like they do
Tunnels to towers, right?
Yeah. I mean,
You look at
Right.
some of the great things that have happened, and some of these charities, and look at all the good that Frank Silla's done with Tunnel to Towers.
Yeah.
right. So this next question is specifically for you, Kathy. So how has the journey of grief changed for families over the last 25 years, would you say?
Um, Well, first it was focusing on my kids, make sure they're happy and normal, safe. There was absence. Um, I played soccer, and one day after a soccer game, I went to TGI Fridays with one of my girlfriends, Debbie Patchen.
Yeah.
And we overheard someone talking, and turns out to be a fireman, and he's talking about 9/11 and how he has it so much harder than the widows because he's never going to see his work partner, at the meal again. He's going to go to work. He's not going to go on jobs with them. And
Right.
I don't think he realized that every minute of every day of my life changed. Every holiday, every milestone. My kids, John, he was 3 months old. His first steps, his first birthday, first day at school, everything changed.
If you met Kathy's sons,
Mhm.
this young lady did an amazing job raising these three guys. They are just outstanding human beings, every single one. They're wonderful young men, and I'm proud to know them all, and I'm certainly proud to know Kathy.
But Joe was supposed to be their Cub Scout leader. Joe was an Eagle Scout. He wanted them to be Eagle Scouts. He never got to do that. Then I became friends with the other widows, and you have something in common. Misery loves company, they say, and it's true. We all know our own grief. It's the same. I forgot the question.
No, just like how the journey of grief, has
Yeah.
it changed, or how, if it's changed?
But yeah, it's still there. It's in our lives every single day. So it really hasn't changed for us. But we don't expect it to change for everybody because everybody moves on with their life. But for us, it's still there.
Yes, understood. Thank you for taking the time to answer that. So the next question is for everybody. What advice do you have as veteran first responders? I realize two of you are retired, I'm retired, but what advice would you give as veteran first responders for the younger firefighters and police officers today as they go about their daily duties when they come to work? They report to work, they go out on the street as police officers, they respond as firefighters. What kind of advice would you give them, to help them do their jobs better?
So I go back to that line from the 9/11 report, a failure of the imagination, right? Especially in New York City, whether you're in a fire truck or a police car, that next call, you really have no idea, what you're going to, what you're going to go do. We have those, routine calls. We do a lot of the same, and then it seems, once a week, every other day, you go and do something that you've never seen before. And I'm thinking a few years ago when we responded to one of the sanitation garages in Queens, and it's a four-level garage, and one of the sanitation trucks is sticking out of the building about 40 feet up in the air. I don't know if they were on a ramp or something, but they hit the sidewall. The thing is hanging out, and the driver's still in it. And we don't have an SOP for that, right? So you figure it out, but you have to be very good at the basics, so that you can apply it to the crazy. You can't be complacent. It's you just have to be ready and know your job.
So I often talk to young firefighters, and most of them want to be in busy places. They want to go to fires and emergencies and do the job. And a lot of times, there might be a month or two that things are quiet, and guys will complain, I'm not going to any fires and everything. I always tell guys, listen, be careful what you wish for, number one. Number two, you have to be on your game every single day on every single run when you go out the door, because you turn the corner and that's what you're looking at. Or you're looking at a fire in a building with people jumping out the window, or some other crazy thing. So you have to be on your game 100% of the time. And you know what? Complacency is human nature. It just is. Like when you're not doing much, you're bored, you're not doing anything. As a firefighter, I can even remember as a chief officer, man, I haven't gone to a fire in a while, and you're rusty, you're not on top of your game. But you got to become a student of the job, is the advice I always give people. That's from my perspective. What about you?
Complacency.
Right.
That's the enemy.
It is the
Yeah,
enemy,
yeah.
right?
That's my answer too. You got to treat every job like it can change your whole life. The firemen and cops didn't know what they were walking into on 9/11, and a lot of them never came home. You always have to be ready to perform, and not just for yourself, but for your partner and for everybody around you. Also, you have to know your family. You have to keep your beneficiary up to date. You have to keep your know who's going to take care of your kids if something happens to you. It's things that the younger guys don't think about, but I've had some horror stories.
Oh, that's an absolute great point, that when you get hired, you're young, maybe you're not married, or maybe you are married, and then you're not married.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of horror stories like that.
Yeah. Never assume that department's going to take care of your family. Just make sure everything's taken care of.
That's good. I like that. That's great advice. Paul?
Yeah, I don't know that I can add too much to that. That's about it. Complacency is, it is human nature, and you fight it. Certainly on September 11th, the whole idea of, busy companies and slow companies just got stood on its head.
That's right.
It didn't matter what part of the city you worked in. Yeah, pretty much if you put that uniform on, police officer or firefighter or EMT, you don't know what the next call is
That's
going
right.
to be. And you have to be prepared for it.
Like if you're a police officer, you do a car stop. Everybody knows a cop is stopping you, that you're a cop, but nobody knows, but you don't know who you're stopping. So you always have to be ready. That person's going to have a gun.
Yeah.
You have to treat every car stop like it's a
Yep.
felony stop.
That's great stuff. So the theme is the same. Be ready. Be prepared all the time. John mentioned before, I had a good friend of mine. He's a captain now in the fire department. He used to tell young people, you need to be brilliant in the basics. Whatever the job is, you got to be brilliant in the basics, and don't skip steps. Always kind of have the routine. And if you do that, you'll be successful most of the time. And listen, all these jobs we're talking about, fire, police, EMS, they're very unpredictable. They're just the way they are. That's almost a beauty of the job. I always felt like that. That's what I loved about the job. It was exciting, something different all the time. So, and it's just a matter of, if you have the mindset, you got to have the mindset to be prepared all the time, every day, every hour to talk. So I have a question for the chief. So we know how resilient the FDNY has always been, but what are some of the significant lessons that we learned, and some of the more important policy or procedural changes that have been made since 9/11?
So you can imagine, and part of this is because technology has advanced, but we would have the officers, and I was a lieutenant at the time, the writing list, who's working that tour, right? So the officer would make 2 copies, right? One copy would be in your shirt pocket. The other copy would be on the dashboard of the rig. So now you have the collapse, you have people missing, you have fire trucks buried and destroyed. We had no idea who was working, right? We had to figure that out. We had to go back to the firehouse and hope that all of that and decipher that. Any organization that gets stressed to the point that the fire department was that day, the police department, the Port Authority, it's going to show your cracks and your failures, and we certainly saw a lot of that. One of the one of the recommendations from the McKenzie report, which looked specifically at the fire department that day, was better firefighter accountability. So we now have, on my phone, I can look up and see the riding list of every company in the city, right? The name of the officer, who's driving, the different positions. Based on radio transmissions, I can tell who's making that transmission, the name of the firefighter, the name of the officer, who's made that transmission. So we've, greatly increased that. Our communications. We had a bombing at the Trade Center in 1993. The after action report from that, we knew we could not communicate from the lobby to the upper floors. 7 years later, 8 years later, we have the same radios with the same problem, right? All of that's been corrected. Now, from miles away, we could make transmissions that the people in that building would hear, right? The chief, the incident commander, didn't have the ability from their car outside to make a transmission that everybody would hear. That's all been corrected. If anybody, the holy grail, I would say right now in the fire service is firefighter tracking, right? So if you look at it on the XY axis, right, if somebody's on the ground, we're able to track that. What we can't track yet, and we have a lot of people working on it, is the Z axis, right? How far off the ground is somebody? So that when somebody's in trouble in a building, we're able to pinpoint exactly where they are, what floor they are. And it might seem easy, but there's a lot of smart people that haven't figured that out yet. And then you'd have to overlay that to the floors of the building. To say somebody is 400 feet off the ground is great, but we want to know what floor they're on. And with floor numbers and floor heights varying. So the technology and the firefighter accountability has, greatly increased, firefighter safety. And another one that we had overhauled on policies is our recall procedure. So we had a full recall, which means everybody came to work. And I think very quickly we realized we can't have everybody at work today because who's going to be at work tomorrow? So then trying to send home, on the afternoon and night of September 11th, trying to send half of the fire department home, I don't think many people listened, right? It took a couple of days for us to, to get that schedule right. But certainly a lot of lessons learned.
So on that day, particularly in the fire department, to John's point, the entire senior staff of the fire department responded to the World Trade Center. Chief of department, fire commissioner, first deputy commander. We had about 20 staff chiefs.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore, really.
We don't do that anymore. Our entire command structure got killed. Chief of department was killed, first deputy fire commissioner, several senior staff chiefs with a tremendous amount of experience, tremendous. The folks that took over post 9/11 that kind of rebuilt the fire department, they did a tremendous job getting us back on our feet. But it took some time, right? We lost so much experience that day. Our special operations commander, which John and I both worked in at one time in our careers, out of the 343 firefighters that were killed, I think 90 or 95 were from our special operations command, which is probably our most experienced firefighters and fire officers and chief officers. That was about, I think, 90 out of about 400 firefighters in special operations, maybe 500. So, almost 20% of the command was killed. So that was a big, big hole to fill. But post 9/11, to the resilience point, these guys that rebuilt the department afterwards did a tremendous job. But we don't do that anymore. We don't send everybody from the senior.
And if you think of when we had that ramming attack on the West Side Highway in 2017, 2018, distinctly remember the borough commander and the chief of department going to the scene and nobody else to the scene, right? And we expecting other incidents, and but that was a hard learned lesson.
So the next question is for Paul. Paul, what motivated you to write your book? You kind of mentioned a little bit before. Second part of that question, how was it received by the family, friends, and colleagues of Danny Sir?
Yeah, after September 11th, I went, to the counseling unit, like a lot of other, probably like hundreds of other firefighters. And the counselor that I had, he was great, Jerry Moriarty. He suggested, he said sometimes to help diffuse a traumatic event, you write it down. He said when you're done writing it, he said you can burn it, you can throw it in the garbage, you can put it in the drawer, whatever. It's just the idea of getting it out. So I would see him, I'd write for a while, talk for a while. And by December, I had filled up like a 5-subject notebook of sitting in the office writing with him. And I put it in the drawer, and I forgot about it. I mean, I didn't really forget about it, but I didn't look at it. I was working, and so when I retired, about 15 years later, within about 2 days, I took it out and I started looking at it, and I was like, wow, this is like that word I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing, the contemporaneous notes. You have, and because your memory fades, but I'm reading something that was written, within the days or weeks of this event. And I thought, I should do something with this. There's like this seminal event in American history, and to honor Danny Sir, to get this story out. So I spent about 3 years writing the book. My wife Mary read it a few times, and when it was done, I reached out to Danny's widow, and she was like, yeah, let's do something with it, So I spent the next 2 years, and what I did was I reached out to everybody. First, the 4 firefighters who I was working with, and then anybody mentioned in the book, I would send them a copy of it to see that what I said was accurate and that they were okay with it. And we spent a lot of time in having lunch and diners and stuff and talking about it. And so 5 years later, I published it on August 9th, 2021. And I didn't until I even sent it to the senior guys in 216 and 108, because I was a covering officer there. I was never assigned there, and I just didn't want to get the wrong tone, And when everybody was kind of on board with it, then I put it out. And then also at the last minute, I realized, what if it sells a copy? What am I going to do with the money? And that's when we came up with Tom Richardson is the liaison between the FDNY and the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And the proceeds of the book goes to the NFFF, and through them it goes to the counseling unit. And then there is like maybe 10% that goes to the St. Francis Bread Line by Madison Square Garden, New York City, because Michael Judge figures in the story too, Father Michael Judge. But so that's kind of how.
So I want to. I called Paul after I read the book, and I thanked him many times for writing it. So I was the chief of department for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So the book came out about a month before the 20th anniversary. So I knew I had to speak at the 20th anniversary commemoration, and I was like, this is like a big responsibility. I want to get it right. So I was kind of trying to figure out what am I gonna do to prepare for this, because I was going to be speaking to thousands of firefighters, hundreds of family members from 9/11 and post 9/11 in St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I was like a wreck. I didn't have a problem speaking. I just wanted to get it right. I did 3 things to prepare that day. One of them was to read that book. One was to go to a memorial mass for Father Michael Judge. Father Michael Judge was from St. Francis of Assisi Church, around down the block from Madison Square Garden. He passed on 9/11. And I forget what the third thing was, but I did 3 things. And I'm telling you, when I read that book, it was just it was so helpful to help me prepare for that day. And I'll never forget it. And I really would encourage anybody that hasn't to read the story. It's wonderful. So thank you for the book, and I appreciate you answering that question too. Thank you so much. So this next question is from my friend Kathy. What are the best ways younger family members are keeping their loved ones' legacies alive? So now you had 3 sons, and I know you know other widows that had children. What's the best ways that you have heard of or seen these young people, keep their family members' legacies alive?
You first of all live a life that would make your parent proud. Stay out of trouble, visit, talk, respect, and honor their parents. My husband and his brother were killed leaving behind his parents. So I made sure that my in-laws saw my kids every Monday. They had to see them every week, and just honor their parents. Tells ordinary stories, funny stories. When my husband died, my father-in-law had people write stories. There was no internet the way it was today. And he had books made of my husband's stories. And some people who wrote the stories at his funeral, they read them like 20 years later. They don't even remember writing them because you said they were fresh. It was fresh in their mind at the time.
Yeah.
But just everyday stories. A lot of, not a lot, but some people have the foundations, to keep their legacy alive. Just.
I like what you said. The first thing you said about honor, or live a life that your parent would be proud of, right? And I think your boys have certainly met that metric, if you will, right? They've done a tremendous job. They're great guys, great kids. So this is for everybody, and I'll start with the chief. How can communities support families who feel forgotten as time has moved further away from 2001? Now, Blue Point, Bayport, small community where I live, most Long Island communities are fairly small, and a lot of places, especially small communities like that, everybody knows everybody, right? But what can communities do to support the families of 9/11 folks?
Well, I think, what we have said and kind of a vow of never forget. And, I grew up in Ronkonkoma. I live in Smithtown. I would think, I think it's in most towns on Long Island, there's something named for somebody that died on September 11th. And whether there's a memorial at the post office or at the firehouse or at the school, I think of Motor Parkway in Ronkonkoma, and it's got those names for John Napolitano from Rescue 2, right? He was he grew up in Ronkonkoma also. It's a reminder, of what Long Island lost on that day too. I know it was in Lower Manhattan, but and just remembering what never forget means, and it's not just who they are and their names, but the life they lived, and what the decisions and what they did that day.
Kathy?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. That's all right.
What was the question?
What can communities do
Oh.
to
Just
support families?
just if you see a family member, just treat the loss as if it just happened. I was thinking about them. Sorry.
It's okay. So I'll give you an example. Like in my community, I live in Deer Park, and every year we do a 9/11 Remembrance ceremony at our firehouse. Our local Lions Club several years ago raised money and built a beautiful memorial, and we have it on the property of the fire department. It's a symbol of the Twin Towers. We had 12 people from our community that were killed that day. Most of them were first responders, and they're on the monument. And then we've since added post 9/11 members of the community as well. And I have found over the years that a lot of the families don't come anymore. Some of them have passed on, quite frankly, but other families have moved on. But every year we get like probably 4 out of the 12 9/11 families that come every year, and every year they say, thank you, thank you, thank you for doing this. It's a short ceremony. It's about 20 minutes. We say a prayer. We sing the national anthem. We sing God Bless America. We read the names. We toll the bell. We have a priest, other clergy members there, and we just try to do the right thing. And often people say, why are we still doing this? But I'm going to tell you, every year, at least one of those family members comes up and says to us, thank you for doing this and keep doing it, please. As long as I'm alive, I will be here, So, I think something like that, it's a small community event. It takes a few minutes. Then we go in the firehouse, we have cake and coffee. Some of the family members hang around for a while because they want to be with people and they want to talk about it. They want to tell their story and tell their loved one's story. So I think that's something small. It's something easy to do. And quite frankly, I don't think enough communities do that. That's my opinion. But, that's it. Paul, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many good memorials and ceremonies and people honoring it. Sometimes, again, it's just a personal thing. I'm sure everybody would have their own take on this, but I find sometimes there's like some really basically mundane stuff scheduled for September 11th. It always kind of bothers me, and even and again, someone else would probably say you got to live, So, but even like a baseball game or golf or tennis or a football game, like I don't know. I always feel like that day is just September 11th, and it does bother me a little bit when sometimes things are scheduled that I feel like they could be scheduled on another day.
Right.
But again, there are so many, beautiful memorials and monuments everywhere. It really is, it's very moving.
On September 11th, I had just before that had been promoted out of Squad 18, and we were in Lower Manhattan, and we lost seven firefighters that day. And what we had done for all the years after is the morning of September 11th, and we were very fortunate that we recovered all 7 of our guys. By October, we had found all 7, and we still have not identified a lot of people from that. But what we would do as a company is send 2 or 3 people to every grave site the morning of September 11th. And we have a couple of guys out here, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, upstate, a couple in Nassau. So, they would spread out, and a lot of times we'd see the family members come to the gravesite that morning, and just a very nice, peaceful way to to spend the morning.
There's one other thing that I always try to remember, and I always try to mention anytime I'm speaking at an event related to 9/11, and to kind of put things in perspective. We're all up here representing the first responder community, right? 343 firefighters, 23 New York City police officers, 37 Port Authority employees. 2,977 people were killed in between the 3 locations. Most of them were civilians. At the Pentagon, there was some military. Most of the people that died that day were ordinary people that went to work to provide for their families, whether they were cooks, they were executive assistants, they were lawyers, they were doctors, whatever they were ordinary people, just went to work. The folks that got on those planes were going, some of them were business people, some of them were going on vacations. And I always try to tell people, sometimes we forget that. I think we forget that there were other people, we as first responders, we lost our friends and our family members that were first responders. But that's to me, I always find that it means something to me to remember that and put it in context, because there were a lot of just regular folks that were killed that day just because they went to work, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I was just talking to a guy I was in the Navy with about that yesterday. He gets upset every year because we talk about 9/11 in the towers, but he put 3 of his coworkers on a plane that day in, I think, Dallas.
Mhm.
And, you've never seen them again after that. And we don't talk about the Pentagon and the people on the planes.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And you've heard over the years, recordings of people on the telephone
Yeah.
with their family member, telling them how they loved them. They were in the Trade Center, some guy calling from the 90-something floor, calling his wife, right? Or people were on the planes, I think, making phone calls to their family members. So I think that's important for us to try and remember that as well, when we do these ceremonial things. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to ask you all if you have any questions for the panel before we close it out. So this, I think, is such an important question, and I really think this is very important in our society today. As time moves further away from 9/11, how can the public help ensure, or how can we, as individuals, ensure that younger generations truly understand the human cost of that day? Because I think it gets lost in the school systems. It just does. And what can we do? What can we do?
That's a great question, and we know it, and I think people our age know it because we lived through it, right? And for the older folks, certainly they remember Kennedy assassination, and in my life, when the Challenger, when the Challenger exploded, because you lived it, and to hear that a lot of younger people, and there's certainly a lot have been born since that they might not learn about it. They might not know about it because they don't learn about it in school. On September 18th, with the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, they are released. We have an event at a school in Staten Island. It's where Sal Casano's daughter is the principal, where they're releasing a curriculum to teach people about, to teach the kids about, September 11th and, what happened, that day, what it meant to the country. And, the saying before about the positives. And if you remember how, together and tight the country felt, after that. And it wasn't all in, in vengeance or revenge. It was, I'm sure there was a little bit of that, but it was, the country was together a lot more than I think we felt the last couple of years. But I think that we've got to push that curriculum in the schools to teach what happened that day, and to keep it alive. Otherwise, in another 10 or 15 years, you're going to have people having kids that none of them know what happened that day and don't know the story, and you don't always trust the people to find out on their own if it's not taught in the schools.
What do you think, Ken?
It has to be taught. And my son said that going to the museum, my sons were 6 and 8 at the time, going to the museum helped too, just seeing the photos of all the victims and the fire truck that's there, and just the history that's in the museum. But also, we forget that it's not over. They were all victims, and there's still a trial going on. And I never see that in the news. It's got to be reported that what actually happened, like why it happened, who did it. And
Who
it
they
has to be
were,
taught.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
That's forgotten.
It is forgotten, 100% forgotten. And that's just unfortunate, in our society that we allow that to happen, right? Paul?
Similar to the John, we have grandchildren, so I'm aware of what they're getting taught in school, and some of them experience, a program about September 11th, and some don't. It would be nice if they had some kind of standardized curriculum or something more formal. Especially New York City DOE, they would set the tone. September 11th is probably a tough date for them. It's right at the beginning of the school year, which, that is practical. It's not like a teacher can assign something, but at the same time that we are going to lose the memory of it. Things fade fast. That's just the nature of it, I guess. But for now, I think, I think that schools would probably be the place to try to get some kind of more formal curriculum.
In my community, we tried a few years after 9/11, I'll say 2005 or 6-ish, we tried to start like an essay contest about 9/11 in the middle school, and say, we were going to, look at the essays and give out. We did it for 2 years, but it was a struggle, man. We weren't getting submissions. I just didn't think the teachers were invested, and
Right.
we would go and we would talk to the school administration and say, hey, we have, I think in the middle school, there was 1,500 kids, 6, 7, 8 grade. And we would get 3 or 4 essays. And I was very disappointed. So we kind of let it go. We didn't do it thereafter. And that was very disappointing, but everybody kind of agrees here. And I think your point is an excellent point that, they need to know what happened and why it happened and how it happened. I think that's important for young children or people that are going to be young adults to know that. They don't teach it in high school. They don't teach it in elementary school. They don't teach it in college, most colleges, I should say. And so, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But we all happen to agree on that, so that's a good thing. And I saw a lot of heads nodding in the audience as well. So I'm going to take a few minutes. Do any of you have questions for the folks on the panel that you thought of? Ma'am?
Well, and actually, I have a point to bring up. I went to Columbia University. They actually did have a 9/11 course. I took it when I was there. I mean, it was a very formative experience, even though I didn't lose anybody there, but more from the perspective of kind of the backlash that happened right afterwards, people being mistaken as potential terrorists.
Sure.
That was a pretty formative and shaping experience for me. But I'm wondering if any of the panelists could speak to, already there's kind of, when my daughter was still in the public schools, parents wanted their children shielded from this and not really brought up. And now that I'm in the homeschool space, that's kind of a thing too, preserving the innocence of children. But, as one of the panelists here, if you lived that experience, there was no way that you were shielded from that. And, very young children were impacted, all different age groups. I was wondering if any of the panelists could speak to that as well, too. Kind of reaching other communities, whether it's the homeschool space or just collaborating more on, how we can have it within the public schools itself, with, keeping it alive and, kind of responding to people being concerned about, shielding children's innocence.
So I'd be curious to see this program that the chief mentioned that they're going to introduce in Staten Island. I'd be curious to see how that has all developed or will develop.
And I would imagine that it's, the way it's been built or created, that it would be age appropriate and not be at too young of an age, and introduce the proper, for that proper age, realizing that you don't want to, shock, children about it. But I think I remember learning about Pearl Harbor in school, right? And I'm not sure whether that was elementary school or middle school American history, but somewhere along the way, we need to know the history of our country.
Yeah, good and bad, right? That's good and bad, right?
But it's not just 9/11, it's, the Iraq War, Iran War, all that other stuff that grew out of that, and you have people, veterans that are, maimed and killed, so.
7,000 members of the military were killed in the 20 years post 9/11 in those wars.
You know.
7,000. And thousands and tens of thousands more were injured, right?
When she was in middle school, I had to sign the waiver allowing her to be taught about 9/11. And a lot of the majority of in her class were not allowed to learn or to see the video.
So I think what's happened too, and we always want to try and keep politics out of these conversations as best we can, but I think what's happened in our society, and it's a fact, that many things just get politicized, and that's unfortunate because there is a way, and I think there's a reasonable way to keep that out of it and to just give the facts. This is what happened. This is why it happened. This is who did it. And we learn from it and we move on. But it's a tough conversation. I remember going to the school district when we tried to do this essay contest, and we got pushback at first. We did. And it wasn't until a new superintendent came in and he said, no, we're going to do this. And he kind of told his administrators, it just never got off the ground, really, never took hold, Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Mike?
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
First of all, thank you guys very much. My perspective, and maybe this is a little an oddball thing, but I think after 9/11, a lot of people had PTSD and other mental illnesses in the service prior to that. And I think the impact of 9/11 upped the game for many departments, including volunteers and small careers departments, to actually invest money, not in just apparatus and training, but realize that if you don't have a mentally stable individual to go to work and use those tools and knowledge, you don't have a department. So I think 9/11 in a lot of ways has really upped the game for the police and the fire service to provide and understand and be more understanding about it. It not only affects the individual, it affects their families as well.
100%. So, I'm sorry.
And that's a great point, Mike. And one of the in my experience, it's a little bit of I don't think it's necessarily true in my experience from what I've seen that this this thought that you got to be too tough or too macho to have your feelings and Mike's a longtime special operations guy from from the city. We didn't have that problem, right? We were able to talk about it and share your feelings, and it was the counseling service unit, and again going back to the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, they fund a lot of our peer counselors, and we don't do this thing where everybody's got to sit in a circle and everybody has to talk. We'll put peer counselors in there that are retired firefighters that have been there and that have specific training that will come in and it's whether it's something after an event like 9/11, if we've had a firefighter fatality, if they've had a serious incident with civilian fatalities or anything, something with a child, anything that is a traumatic event, we'll put them in there just to talk to our guys, and they almost self-identify, right? The guys that need a little help, they have that option, and it seems to work very well. And just what we say is just like you see somebody in trouble on the fire ground, you would point them out. If you see somebody in trouble in the firehouse because they're struggling with some of this, we get them help. And even before 9/11, I think we were very good at that and continue with that.
So we like FDNY, we're very, very lucky, right? We're very big. We have a very robust counseling services unit with a lot of peer counselors, and I think the police department does as well. We get the funding through the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation for the peer counseling program, but there are a lot of small departments around the country that don't have that capability. But the education piece is out there. International Association of Firefighters actually provides the training. And I'll give you my experience here on Long Island. I was the chief in my volunteer department a couple of times over the years, and the county of Suffolk County Department of Health, when we've had traumatic incidents all you had to do was make a phone call to the county, and they had peer counselors on standby, and we could bring them in. So that has been done much better out here on Long Island, at least from my experience, and it continues to get better. So, but you bring up a great point. Mental health is a really near the top of the list now as far as taking care of our people, because if we don't take care of our people, we don't have a job. Like, right, we need, to your point, stable individuals, somewhat, to do these jobs, So, yeah, we could make an argument that to do the job, you can't be that stable, but
So,
to be able, yeah, right, exactly, right. And some are more stable than others. So, but the counseling piece is a big deal, the mental health piece, and in fact, suicide has become a big problem in the first responder community. As you know, the military community, former military, it's a big deal. And so we do a much better job now in the fire department, I know, of suicide prevention and making people aware of some of the signs and symptoms, if you will, of somebody that might not be doing well, and we do a better job at that.
You made I was listening to you, Chief, when you were speaking, and you were talking about technology, and that's kind of where my head had gone. And I was thinking, like a pinging device, and then you threw it out with the XY grid, and I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense. Excuse me. And at the time of 9/11, was there any tracking devices that were used? And had that technology been available and we utilized it, would it have made rescue and recovery easier? And when you said to the point about complacency, which, so much time, 25 years has passed, are we still complacent with the technology, or are we?
No, I mean,
Or
we
prepared
have-
that if,
we
God
have
forbid, something
embraced,
like
right,
this ever happen again?
there's a saying about the fire service, right? It's 150 years of bravery unimpeded by progress, right? And which I don't think is true, because you look at how much we have embraced technology and how much, we use it. I would argue that we're at the forefront in the American Fire Service of using technology, but we can only use what works all the time, right? So if you have a phone, the phone gives you pretty good location, but only if you have service, right? So this would need to work in a subway in Manhattan, a basement in the South Bronx, and a rooftop in Staten Island. And it's some of those situations that you just don't have service. But we have a group, a strategic innovation group, that is looking at all of this, and we'll get it, we'll use it. And, we go to these trade shows where, especially when they see we're from New York City, they want to sell us everything. And they tell us they have this stuff that works, and we'll bring them out to the fire academy and show that what they're saying doesn't work, and send them on their way. But when we get it, we invest in it and use it to protect our people and the people of the city. But we very open-minded for technology.
I think it's an evolving business, firefighter location technology. There's a lot of research being done at the federal level, but I think it's a long way off, if you will. Like, it's kind of down the road a piece before we can figure it out where it could really be helpful. But what we've done thus far, I think what the fire department has done thus far, is light years ahead of 9/11. Like, we know who's there, we know who they are, we know where they're supposed to be, right? And then we could usually key in or hone in on them as quickly as possible. And we've had a lot of success stories with rescuing firefighters in situations. So, everybody has a radio now versus years and years ago. They didn't.
That's a great point. On September 11th, not everybody was issued a radio.
Not everybody had a radio. Every firefighter has a radio now. Every single firefighter, fire officer on the fire ground has a radio. So that's been something small like that.
That's a great point.
We have time for maybe one more question if you have, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I just wanted to make a comment. I live in this community and every day, every single day, we pay homage to Jennifer's husband. And she provides services that nobody else is providing. If there's somebody lost, if there's somebody that needs food, if there's somebody's house that burns down, if there's somebody needs clothes, whatever, the Johnny Mac Foundation is there. So when you were talking about what communities do, we do something, she does something every day.
That's awesome.
She has an office right here on the grounds of the library. She's everywhere. Thank you.
She's everywhere.
So
Thank you.
it's a really great foundation, and she raises a lot of money. She brings us all together as a community for events, community events.
Yes.
We have fun, we do that kind of stuff, but there's always the underlying thing of helping other people.
Helping others.
Yeah, yeah, so.
Yeah, great. So I have one last question for the panelists. We got about 5 minutes left till we wrap it up. And I'm going to ask you all three, what's the most important message you hope the audience takes away from this panel as they leave this evening?
That, from mine, that even though that day is just about 25 years ago, it has not stopped, right? It is every day. Yesterday we met with myself, the fire commissioner. We met with the chief medical examiner to get our annual report. There are still, and I'm sorry I don't have this I don't remember the number for everybody else, but there's still 127 members of the New York City Fire Department of the 343 that have never been identified from that day. So, the police department did not identify everybody. It's only about 60% of the victims that day that have been identified. 25 years later.
Tommy, I want to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay.
Hi, Maddie.
Hi, how you doing?
How are you?
I'm all right. How's you?
Good.
We'll talk. And I want to say, I'd like to ask you, because I think this is important in terms of remembering, to please tell us how many members have died since 9/11. There are people here. We are waiting in God's waiting room. We are widowers and widows in waiting. We know what's coming. So I'd like to know.
452.
How many police department members? Do you know the number?
Just under 500.
Yeah, I know it was close to 500. Somebody told me that recently. Yeah, it's a lot.
So I appreciate, Chief, when you said that, we live with this every day. Doesn't end.
True. What would you say, Kathy, the most important message for tonight?
To teach it to our children. I think if you don't teach it, you're doing them a disservice. It's just going to repeat itself. Why and how it happened, and to vote.
To vote.
Because without 9/11 happened because of the breakdown in our laws and laws that weren't followed, and we have to enforce our laws. And if you're going to vote somebody who's going to enforce our laws.
That's right. It's excellent. Excellent point. Paul?
As I said at the beginning, it's an honor to be here, but again, it's all of, certainly Blue Point, remembers. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to see everybody coming out. And I always, that day, it's been said before, of course, it was the worst of humanity, but it was also the best of humanity. The days, the weeks, the months afterwards, so many people, besides all the courageous acts, just the generosity and the people helping each other. And I can't help but think that's that part of human nature that it's still there, even though our country has gotten kind of splintered. I think that decency and that kindness is still there. So I think that's something worth taking away, from 9/11. But thanks to Chief Richardson, Tom Richardson for having us.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah.
It's all good.
It's all good. Yeah, he does all this stuff for so many people, and God bless him. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So the one thing I'll say, here's what I say, as human beings, I always felt, and I still feel that always, and I always will, and I tell my kids this. I believe as human beings, whether you're religious or you're not, doesn't matter. You could be spiritual and not religious and be both as well. I believe we were all put on this earth to serve in one way, shape, or form. Serve one another, serve our communities as you're doing with your foundation. Serve, however, your boys are served in the Marine Corps, they're police officers. We're firefighters or retired dummies now. So I believe that we need to keep in mind that we need to teach service to humanity. Like I believe that so strongly, and I think that gets lost in our society somehow. I know the folks that are only a little older here, you lived it, the greatest generation. My father was a Korean War Marine. He was the toughest guy I ever met in my life, but he always talked about helping others. And if we could remember that as we walk out of here tonight, I think that's really, really important. So thank you to the library, the Blue Point community. Thank you to your foundation and all that you do in the community. And thank you for everybody coming out on a Tuesday night to your local library. That's great that they did this. Thank you all very much.
Dad, you dropped down.
My son will probably read it.